All right. Welcome, everyone.
Hey.
Welcome or welcome back. Well, Jacob, I know it's welcome back for you because you've been also
What's up,
on.
Jacob?
Welcome, welcome. Let's see, we've got Bill and Celine still setting up in the waiting room.
hmm
Sweet. It's my 8th session today. So my eyes are starting to water soon, but my brain's alive. Welcome,
Yeah,
everyone.
for the next one, you have to have the eye drops, in between
Yes,
sessions.
I feel it. I feel it. Um, this also doesn't happen every week, hey? So I think it's also, it's
True,
a
true.
fun experience. Sweet. Well, welcome, Remo and Javier. I still see you have people in the waiting room that are setting up. My name is Anna Maria. I am a Gilles co-pilot today. And yeah, as I said, 8 session. We still have some more sessions going on. It's been going on since this morning at 9:30. I think you opened the festival, Jacob. Scene
Oh,
in
wow.
Scenes, an epic 24 hours around the clock learning festival to celebrate the launch of Butter Scenes on Product Hunt. Here's the link. Butter us with some love, some likes, some of the good stuff. We're very, very,
Yeah,
very excited for the Butter Baby we're putting into the world today. It's
let
really
me do that
fun.
right now. Let me send a comment and everything.
That's it. That's it. And we are celebrating by bringing together over 40 experts in facilitation, learning, collaboration, innovation, startups, community from around the globe. And we get to learn from them, and we get to play with Butter Scenes in Zoom this time. It's really weird to be not in Butter.
I know,
But
right?
I
still,
know
it
you
has
can
a Butter
relate to,
flavor.
right? So
I can totally relate to that, but I know how it feels a bit weird. But you know what? That's we're gonna make it work.
we
We're
have to
gonna make
roll
it
with the
work.
punches, right?
We're
Amen.
leaning into it. We're leaning into it. Now, for everyone joining us, we are recording the sessions, and so camera off is totally fine. If you do decide to keep it off, Gilles and I will be really happy because we get to kind of see how you're doing and get some
Yeah.
feedback as well.
Okay.
Fantastic. Now let me kill the music here and welcome Gilles, who is going to be our host today, our facilitator. He's the co-founder and CEO of Livestorm and a very strong advocate of remote work, because I think
Yeah.
Livestorm is remote
100%
first,
remote.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you
Uh,
so much for having me. That's it's really cool to be here. It's been kind of a last minute talk with Jacob, I think a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, shit, yeah, sure, let's do
these
it.
are the
I
best
want to do it.
ones.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for accepting the invitation, even so short notice. The floor is yours. Take it away, and I will definitely paste your scenes in the chat.
Yes.
I'm gonna welcome everyone to join us there.
hmm
Uh,
I'm gonna
Michael,
share my screen in the
yes.
meantime. Here we go.
All of them were recorded, so we're gonna have access to them soon as well.
Yes. Okay, here we go. All right, so sharing a little bit of that screen, sharing a little bit of that bird scenes. So yeah, as you say, so my name is Gilles. I'm well, it's a very, very weird name to say in English, so I'm sorry. I'm French, as you can probably tell by my accent. But anyway, so I'm the CEO, co-founder of Livestorm. We're a remote company. And I think just to break the ice for the ones that are actually connected, joining the Butter scene right now, just do some, drop some pins here on the map. Wow, that's pretty cool. Well, we'll have someone like very far away. So that person is actually
Good
way,
morning.
in the morning, right? That's the morning. That's
Yeah,
cool.
that's
All right. And I think this like very, really cool features. I want to try it out. Sorry, it's gonna be
mhm.
yet another sound, but feels like something I wanted to try out. I don't know. I thought this feature was really cool. Anyway, so it's getting a little bit late for all of us. I'm just going to move forward here in the presentation. So as I said, my name is Gilles, co-founder of Livestorm. So Livestorm is a webinar platform. We've been around for the past 8 to 9 years, even now close to that. We have about like 4,000 customers, mostly customer facing, meaning sales and marketing, right? And 80% of that is pretty much in Europe. So really European DNA. We are about slightly above 100 people, fully remote. We have people in APAC in the US. We have people in Europe. We also have a really small team of front-end engineers in Mauritius. So, it's been all over the place. And we historically been selling to SMB and in market. And for the past 3 to 4 years, now we've been like really slowly adding the enterprise funnel on top of it all. And it also comes with a lot of challenges because enterprise requires, actual traditional old school kind of selling, and remote setting is not entirely something quite intuitive for that sort of selling process. So I want to tell you about what has been my experience as managing teams from 10, 20, 30, 80, and we even scaled up to 165, and then we downscaled the team down to 105. So, it has been some challenges, very different challenges in remote. And so this is what we're going to cover today. So first of all, if you have some, using all of that goodies on better scenes, if you have some, insights on what's your remote configuration today, just like drop a quick quote here. So are you remote? Are you hybrid? Are you not remote at all? Obviously for us, we're all fully remote, as I said, right? So we have a little bit of a hybrid in the room, and for the rest, fully remote. So that's going to be very, you're going to relate a lot up to what I'm going to say now. All right. So I think the main question for a starter is a smaller team better than a bigger team when it comes to remote company, right? And there is a thing, and you probably know it better than me, Jacob, and Amaria, it's a small team. Communications flow very naturally, very organically. The information level is pretty straightforward, to be honest, because everybody knows whoever is doing what. How the company is doing, how whatever team is doing, whatever, right? So there is no mishap in terms of communication, or at least very few. Also, team members, they can share updates, they can seek help, because you usually have this sort of weekly type of things where everybody, actually the entire company, is within the room, which kind of facilitates things. Or within the room, I mean within the same, let's say, butter room or Livestorm room or Zoom room, whatever room, right? So virtual room, I mean. And this is the perfect example. Like, this photo was actually our very first offsite, and you have literally the entire company on this photo. That's just crazy to me. And today 105, and you can tell that it is much easier to work in that scenario, obviously. But it also comes with challenges, right? Obviously, you have a workload, and as you start growing and you start increasing the number of customers and whatnot, you create organically more workload. You have more stuff to do, more marketing, more engineering, blah, blah, blah. And you cannot keep the same size forever and ever, because otherwise, people will burn out, and you want to avoid that. The second thing is you'll start needing new functions, new things that people don't know what to do, right? Engineering will have a new technology, marketing will require another, like creating content if you didn't create content before, blah, blah, blah. And also, if you ever have people leaving, when one people leaves and it's 1 out of 5 in a company, or 1 out of 10, all of a sudden it's 10% of the company that just pops out. And if that person was responsible for one thing in a company, you don't have any fail safe. You don't have a net, right? And that's actually kind of, I wouldn't say dangerous, but it can slow things down very, very quickly. So smaller is not always better. So actually, we can turn this thing around. What is having a bigger company a worse setting for remote, right? And actually, it does come with very big challenges. So here we are. So now, in remote setting, the first thing is, and I was the first actually to witness that, you kind of lose sight of who we hire, right? We kind of lose sight of, because out of a sudden you start delegating to your manager, to your managee's manager, and unless you're at the end of the process, and even if you're at the end of the process, sometimes you kind of lose sight on just the technical stuff and the operational stuff that the person is going to be doing. So you kind of checks out the culture, that sort of thing, but you don't have the same perspective on who you hire. You lose also perspective and context on what is being done. right? I don't have, for example, today we are 105. I don't know what, my whatever engineer n minus 2, 3, 4 is actually doing on a daily basis. And, I'm not supposed to know, but I kind of lose perspective on that. So I had to deal with that. And I might create, some emotions and frustration and maybe doubts and whatnot, and I have to deal with it. Losing impact when you're communicating top down, because I'm pretty sure, Jacob, when you go on a room, virtual room again, and you communicate something to the company, you know everybody gets it, right? Everybody just understands it. You get information. You don't have, there is no you don't miss anyone in the way you communicate. Everybody gets the same information. But when you start having like 30, 50, 100, 200 people at once, statistically, you might have maybe 20, 30, 10 people that will not get the message, maybe because they were not present, and you kind of check that. Maybe they were just off, and that's it. And you will have to repeat it. But anyway, you will lose impact when communicating. The message is going to be diluted by the number of people that you have in a company. It's really like a dilution, really. And also you'll have more and more and more notification, information, opinions, and things that will happen. You're gonna have you're gonna get flooded in Slack notifications and email and whatever in threads, and you're gonna have decisions and opinions that are being discussed in Slack threads. So all of a sudden, everything is happening everywhere, and you lose complete control of that. So yeah, so I got a picture of a nightmare here, but there are ways to solve this. But you can tell it's pretty challenging. So, and the consequences of that is bad cultural fit. Also, the trust is everything. And when people, when they don't, when you lose perspective on whatever people are doing, you start trusting. Oh, I don't know what that specific engineer or marketer is doing. Then maybe I'm not, entirely sure of what they were doing are actually good. And you kind of install doubts and eroded trust in this. And the same thing happens the other way around, because you're not actually sitting next to the person you're working with. So that engineer and marketer, again, they're not sitting next to you. They're not able to tell you, oh, I didn't catch what you said on the previous all hands. You discussed the discussion, you discussed the strategy and whatnot. I just wanted to make sure I understand everything. You don't have that. So basically what happens is they don't say anything. They just sit there in their own house or whatever, co-working, and they just stay with that missed information. And maybe that missed information start to become like something of, they don't really trust, or they're not really fully agreeing with what was the message and strategy. And you can tell how the cycle goes on, right? And as I said, information will not be equally distributed. And when that happens, there are errors and mishaps. Happens all the time. So it is, in theory, a very shitty scenario, right? And you might tell, oh, no, remote with 100 people? Hell no, that's not for me. But there are actually mechanisms you can put in place to just avoid that, right? So first of all, let's just do the quick poll here. I want to know, what's the team size? Who am I talking with? Is it like minus 10, 11, 50, 250 plus? I'm assuming it's pretty much in the middle, but let's go. Oh, we have some about 100 people. That's interesting. So that might resonate with some of you of what I just said right now. Okay. Oh, shit. 250 plus. Ooh, fancy. So we have some big guys around here. Interesting. Actually, you might have even more perspective than I have. So that's very cool. All right. So they are actually great examples. And that's the perfect bridge, because they're actually a great example of companies running remote at a large scale. We can name a few here. I know, for example, Deal.com is a good example of that. They have like about 500, 800,000 people. I don't remember even, but all remote. The OGs of remote back in the days, if you remember, InVision was 1,000 people plus, and they were actually fully remote. Like, they didn't turn out quite well for them, but that's another issue. But from a just management perspective, they were able to do that, right? Also GitLab, I think in part, and obviously Photoroom. Photoroom is the French example that we have, like really huge, fantastic company if you know them. Anyway, there is tons of companies. It exists. Zapier. Zapier is a really great example. So there are tons of companies that have done it in the past. So they must have some kind of blueprint, some kind of framework to do it, right? So here are the few principles, I think, that least works for us. You have to treat internal communication as marketing. So what I mean is when you have people remote, this means that essentially it is the same playbook as talking to an audience you don't know or you can't see, right? And that actually is the paradigm of marketing. You know, you're actually going to send a message to people you don't see, and they are somewhere in the world, and they have to absorb that message and understand it, right? So first of all, you have to make the message so simple that anyone can understand it, because in the company you have people that are tech, non-tech, people that are working in finance, in HR, and not everybody has the same understanding of whatever you're going to say, right? Because you have diversity now in your company as soon as you scale. You have also to find the right channels, just like marketing. You have maybe social media, you have LinkedIn, you have I don't know publicity, whatever, right? In internal communication, it works the same way. There are companies where email is going to be better, companies where all hands are going to be better, slides going to be better. You have to find your own thing where it is very tied to the culture. For us, the three things that work is Slack, Notion, all hands. And the thing is, and that's actually one of the other points I think in next after that, is you have to find not just one, but multiple channels. That's actually very interesting. And because you have to hammer a message down, you have to repeat and repeat and repeat and find different channels. But it doesn't have to be too many channels. It has to just pick a few, and you then change the rules. That's actually also very important. People should know where to find stuff. If you out of a sudden start distributing the message in a different way, it gets crazy. It gets crazy, and people just don't know. And people need a map in their lives, and they need a map to find information. So if you change locations all the time, you're doomed. That it's not going to work. Okay. All right. Second principle is identify where the information leaks, where is the vacuums or vacuum of information. Essentially, there will be teams that will ingest information better than others. Could be for multiple reasons. Maybe they are more interested. Could be as simple as that. Could be because the manager is a good relay of that, and that's another option. But in the end, you will have blind spots in a company. You will have people that ingest less information than others. So what you need to do, and this is actually why the manager position is so important in a remote company, they have to absorb every single message and be able to actually relay it the same way you would do. Okay, so you're not the only owner of the message. When you first communicate the message, you have to communicate first to the managers. We have about 20, 30-ish manager, I think, team lead included, so very all the way. And every time I want to say something to the entire company, I always say it first to all the managers, making sure they have understood it. I share all the documentation I need to share, and then I share in the distribution channels channels that I just mentioned. And then I ask them specifically for whatever weekly they are hosting, the next week or this week, to actually relay the message again. So hammer it down and ask feedback of if they have understand if the team has understood the message. And if that's okay, then fine. But also this will give you the feedback of what teams is not receiving the message clearly. And if it happens once, happens twice, maybe happens 3 times. And if that keeps happening, you need to actually go yourself as a CEO on a weekly meeting of those teams and yourself re-explain it again as a ask me anything session, but with a closed, in a closed environment with only those people, and make sure that everything is understood and everything is, and also it will give like them a way to feel closer to you, and that's actually very important. And that could be actually another principle, but it is very important in a remote setting that you shorten the perceived length between them and you. So in a remote setting, the managers, like even the CEO, feels very, very far from whatever individual contributor. And if you are able to join any weekly meeting and be really close to them, you shorten the perceived path to you. And this is actually quite important. All right. The third is, as soon as something gets repeated, you have to document it. That's obviously knowledge bases are today everywhere. That's kind of a thing that is very common to see mostly in software companies, but specifically in remote setting, everything has to be documented. We have documentation about everything. We have documentation obviously about company strategy, about company history, but also on how to buy a freaking train ticket. So everything is actually documented from the most macro to most micro. And as soon as you get this sort of repetition of the questions, you need to document it. It means that people need some sort of map on how to find this information. And also make sure, be obsessed with the fact that this documentation is tied up, that everything is tidy and people actually own their own handbook and are able to make things really clear. I think the principle here will be to treat the company as if everything was asynchronous. Imagine that you don't have Slack, you don't have any sort of chat messages. This is how you should treat documentation. This is how the precise documentation should be in order for people to find on their own the information, right? And log everything. And also, I think the most interesting things to log is something that I was actually realized a couple of years ago, is not just strategies, roadmap, tools, and whatever, decisions. Decisions are extremely fundamental to be logged into a document, because when you do that, it could be like a simple, think of it as a captain log, right? Captain log of every single decision could be like tiny product decision, but very macro decision. And then you keep track of everything. It's like a Git versioning of your company, essentially. And that's actually very useful because it is set in stone. People can search for it and you can actually understand the rationale of what that decision has been made. It's quite interesting to do that. And if you look for handbook and documentation that actually feels very great and public, and you can actually browse. So you see the most famous one is the one from GitLab. It has a lot of handbooks. You can browse and you can see how they actually work, and that's very cool. The most recent one that I found was the Post Hog. So POST and hog like a hog. And it's an open source software, and they have like very great documentation on how they work. It's just crazy. Remote communication is a ballet. So what I mean by that is it is the most unnatural communication scheme possible. You know, you have to have, it is a lot of rules, you have to enforce a way to communicate that will not feel natural. You actually need to feel uncomfortable. You have to enforce strict rules on how to communicate. And for example, you need to have, avoid, first of all, I think we need to avoid ad hoc meetings. Ad hoc meetings are something that should happen maybe once, twice in a week, maybe not even. But what I feel is meetings should be a rhythm. What I mean by that should be cadences. You only should have recurring meetings, because recurring meetings in your agenda, they are actually useful. This is why they are recurring, because there is an actual purpose for them. And if they're not recurring, it's just like a one shot, and maybe it shouldn't be a meeting. Also, cadences means they're predictable, so you can predict the entire week and entire month based on that. So it is very important that people make this effort of adding only recurring meetings, and if anything pops out, try to challenge as much as possible. Meetings is the worst enemy of remote communication in general. Also, you need to have document formats that are very clear for everyone. We just talked about documentation, but the formatting of the documentation is also very, very important. You know, the font you use, the colors you use, the type of blocks and how to use it. It might sound very symbolic and very tiny, but the more precise you are, the easier it gets to find information. Information is just user experience. It's just any landing page design. So if you start changing colors and the font and whatever, basically the brain have to readapt each time. So make sure to have something very formatted. Channel names in Slack. You know, we have channel names pattern for everything. We have news dash something for everything that is kind of newspaper-ish, where teams will post updates. We have guild dash whatever for cross team, units. Maybe temp. Temp is for specific projects, so it's TEMP dash whatever name of the project, and then that creates a specific environment to talk about the project. And as it is temporary, that channel should be archived after a while. Okay, so those are all examples. but it is rules and rules and rules that obviously you start with a few and then you start adding them with time, and this will structure things and make sure that the map still is clear for everyone, whatever the number of people that you have, essentially. And I think the last thing that also kind of plays a part in here in those type of rules, and this is probably the most important rules that you might have here, is it's not because it is remote that you should not be kind when you talk. It's what I mean by that, it is you don't see the eyes, you don't see the face, you don't see the person sending the message. So you also have to assume that the person is saying it with good intentions. But whenever you're writing that message, make sure to write as if you're actually looking at the person. And honestly, that plays a huge part in making sure you don't create unnecessary friction in the company, you know. All right, we're getting there. I think there are 6 principles. So this is the 5th one. Chase inequality. We talked about communication a lot, about information a lot, but this is more of a kind of an admin type of things, admin/management and finance type of thing, right? But inequalities, it's basically noise and trust risk on your company. And what I mean by that is, for example, we have people all over the world. And we have people in Spain, we have people in France, obviously, but also in Mauritius, as I said, and APAC, blah, blah, blah. Okay. A lot of different countries. None of those countries at the same level of salaries, average level of salaries than in Paris, for example. So one could say, oh, I'm going to adapt to each salary and try to optimize depending on the country or the person. What I feel is if you start doing that at scale, you will create a lot of inequalities in your HR grid. And so you take one, my advice is you take one benchmark, and that's the benchmark you're going to apply to every single country, and that's the best way to ensure there is no blind spot in the way you treat salaries and benefits and whatnot. For us, the benchmark is Parisian salaries and Parisian contracts. We call it CDI, which is undetermined contract length, and it comes with also benefits due to the French law with kind of benefits that you whatever like you have like allowance for cultural spend, that sort of thing. This is the kind of thing you get with the French contract. But obviously, when you work in Spain, when you work in Mauritius, you don't necessarily have that. So although you have a local contract, thanks to Gilles, actually, we managed to have the same amount you will be paid in Paris. That's the first thing. And also, if you're not able to get the same type of benefit that you will get with a French contract, then we compensate it with a value amount to make sure there is no questions, no inequalities, no noise, no trust risking thing that could break it all down. You might have there are obvious exceptions, I would say. We have very specific market in this, like the US is very specific. So maybe the US is the benchmark you should have, but trying to work it out, I'm not saying it's easy, but this is at least how we do it. And honestly, it's easier to, and it's a great argument. If you start scaling and you want to hire people, go ahead and saying, I want to hire people in, I don't know, in different countries, in Poland, in APAC, or Eastern Europe, or there is a lot of amazing talent, for example, and also in Africa, in many countries in Africa. If you have this thing where you say all the salaries are actually Parisians, and this is our benchmark, you will attract actually a lot of different talents from everywhere, because you basically have something that might be higher than the average salary in this country. So it is also a way to attract talents in a way. All right. The 6th one is you will build in public. And what I mean by that is we talked a lot about trust, right? Trust is like the main currency actually in remote. And because we don't see each other, everything you can do for your team to trust you, you should do it. And being really transparent on how things are doing, could be finance, could be HR, could be marketing, everything that is done, in the public, public, but internally is something you should do. Okay. we have like financial Ask Me Anything session where basically our CFO goes on stage every quarter and just opens up the books. Piano is open, all the books are open, and people will actually ask questions. We have engineers, we have designers that will actually ask, P&L questions to our CFO, which could be basic questions. What is EBITDA? What is that specific thing? How do we do compared to others? What are the main risks, et cetera, et cetera. And doing that, increase trust, but also, and I think it's something I realized, it increased engagement, which means that people are actually able to get a hold on how the company is working and be more engaged with it and be more committed to it. It was kind of a side effect, and I think it's pretty neat. So I think that's pretty much it for the principle. So if you're connected, please leave some questions. Let's use this really cool feature again that I've just shown. I'm just wondering if it is. I'm kind of hacking this feature. I'm not entirely sure this is how I should be using it, because this is a question I'm actually asking. I mean, it says your answer, and I'm telling you to add a question. But if I did this, then will I have? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, anyway, leave your questions maybe on the on the chat here on the side. I'm happy to take some. I know it's been a lot. Sorry, it's a little bit long, but here we go. All right. Oh.
I am ready to surface 2 questions from Michael. I think he shared. Well, Michael, you're also free to come off mute if you want. Otherwise, I'm fishing them out from the chat. Question: do you measure that level of engagement and communication is getting where it needs to?
Yeah, that's a very good one. So the level of engagement that we do, so there is declarative data and there will be quantitative data, and the two of them will give you like a good picture. So we have this ENPS kind of survey that runs out every quarter or so, right? So there is the generic questions of, how are you doing, blah, 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 that sort of thing, the usual suspects, right? But there is also a report that actually asks people what they have, if they have understood the company direction, if they have doubts, if they have that sort of thing. So they kind of have a way to give feedback on, let's say, the general messaging that has been done, when it comes to strategy. And so for the more micro type of top-down information, so let's say a new HR policy or that sort of thing, so either it's me or it's my executive, so head off and C-levels that go straight to the managers and team leads and whatnot and try to question them about their team and making sure. So you have to do some discovery. It is not just, we could have some sort of, I don't know, like sort of survey, but that will only tell you part of the story. So for example, during the all hands, we also have this kind of quizzes and polls and say, hey, do you have understood? Yes, no, blah, blah, blah. So we have quantitative data, but at the end of the day, you have to do your own discovery as well. And that's, it's a long process, but it's really, really worth it.
Michael, give us a thumbs up if that's, or if you have any follow-up questions, also pop them in the chat.
Yep.
Okay, I've got another one. Do you think people feeling uncomfortable is why they are returning to office? You mentioned at one point that this type of communication is quite uncomfortable. And what would you suggest to ease the uncomfortableness?
So there are actually two types of people that are very well. Actually, I think 3 types. You have like people that are very very big on remote. It's like I'm one of those people. I love remote. I think it enables me to do a lot of different things. I'm a strong advocate for also ideological reasons and etc. And you have people that they need the office, and that obviously that's 100% fine. They need the office. They need to go back to have physical interactions with people, and they need to have these things where they feel physical proximity with others, and that's totally fine. And I think and asking someone like that to work on the remote settings, that's something you should be very aware of when you hire that person. Is we actually have specific questions during the interview process to make sure that we don't hire someone that will feel uncomfortable on the remote setting. And you have a third type of people, actually quite in the middle, that they love the remote setting, but they still feel they need that sort of people energy without actually knowing the person. And usually this is the crowd that hangs out the most in co-working, and they like this kind of remote slash in a co-working type of setting. And usually that works out. It works well, but you need to give them the budget, and you have to give them the settings to make sure they can fulfill that need of energy. That's the only thing you need to be worried about. But if you ask me, the whole returning to the office situation, if it comes from the people working, it's fine. It's just like I just explained. When it comes for the top, it's a whole different story. I think, in my opinion, it's just a way to fire people without having to pay for it. But that's just my strong opinion on it.
Alexandra, I see your question in the chat. I see Michael here has clicked the button. I have a question in butter scenes. Was that a
Yes?
yes?
Yeah, sorry. I
Good.
managed to find somewhere to hide away from
Somewhere
everybody.
quiet. Okay.
Yeah, so it was just to follow up on some of the areas you were talking about. How do you hire for people to work remotely? Because it's one of the areas that you can kind of feel that stuff out, but I didn't know if you had any questions, policies, or ways that you hire people to know whether or not they can actually work remotely.
Well, it is the easiest answer is they have to have done it before. That's the only thing. If you hire someone and they first tell you, yeah, I've never been really on a fully remote basis, that's a red flag. And you will have to either trust your gut because you trust the person that tells you, no, but I can be very autonomous in hiring. But it's not just about autonomy, it's about human contact. And maybe they have that human contact, maybe they have family, maybe they have friends over, maybe they have that, and they don't really need to have like a coworker next to them. But honestly, if they haven't done that before, it's usually in 70% of the time, it's going to be a failure. So they have to have at least 1 year or 2 years of entire remote basis setting because they know how to work, they have a place to do it, they have the settings, they know how to deal with the lack of proximity contact with a coworker, and they have a way to compensate that with friends, family, whatever it needs to, on the personal side. So it is a bit discriminative in a way because but you have to be very clear about this from the get-go, otherwise they're going to be suffering. Actually, they're going to be suffering from that, and we've seen that many times of people that we hired that were not ready for remote, and honestly that was a real struggle and a real suffering for them at some point, and they end up leaving the company. Although they love the company, they just left because they were not feeling good enough. So
all right, Michael, does that hopefully answer the question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, Shirley, I got a question. You'll turn on your camera when you're ready. When the question's ready, okay, I see you.
Hi, morning.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm based in Australia. Thank you for letting me join in late.
oh wow, you're very far away.
No, it's okay. It's not that early. It's 6:45. That's normal.
Okay.
In the morning. How do I say your name? Is it Gilles?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that the equivalent in English is Giles.
Giles? Okay, cool. Well,
Giles,
nice to meet you. Thank you for the presentation. So my question is, I run my own startup, and one of my challenges I found in the early stages that they've left the company, some of the people that I hired because they were working fully remote, sometimes when I invite them to meetings, they just decide not to show up and they don't actually tell me. And then when I try to call them, they don't take my calls. Like, how do you sort of navigate that situation, assuming like you want to keep them in your company? What do you do when people don't want to show up?
I mean, the difficult answer to that is you need to be a little bit more, let's say, exigent about it, to be honest. I mean, when you're in remote settings, attending a meeting, being there and answering to you is just the same courtesy as if I were actually going into your office and not say hi, or maybe you ask me to come to the office and I'll just say no, and I'm going the other direction. And I think you have to treat that on the same level. And people, if they are not willing to commit to that small level of engagement of just attending the meeting you ask them and not and responding when you ask them something, honestly, that's a red flag. And that should be within some sort of performance management type of things, right? And we had that in the past, actually, of people like very like disconnected, literally disconnected from the company because they were not connected on Slack. They were actually not attending the meetings, the few meetings that we have, because we don't have a lot that many, and they were never here. And as such, they were also not participating to whatever was, you know, the kind of culture that we built also on a remote basis. And that was something that the managers say, hey, this is not pretty cool, because we all commit to it. Your coworkers commit to it. You're not the only one doing it. It's not fair. And that happens once, twice, and at some point, what we did is, okay, we're going to put you in a performance improvement plan. But it's not going to be about performance. It's going to be about you actually being there to the meetings that we set up together. And that did not happen. And again, it was a bad hire because that person didn't know how to work on a remote basis. That was actually the conclusion of it. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. When you hit the nail on the head, it's just like common business courtesy. And I think maybe the new generation, they're so used to hiding behind the screens, not to stereotype, but I found that they wouldn't show up to meetings, they wouldn't take the calls, but they would write me a very long email. So they are communicating, but they want to communicate that way, rather than treating me like an actual person.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's tough. That's tough. But again, you determine the culture. It is your company. You determine.
100%. That's why they left, because I had to let them go, because this doesn't really vibe with me. But thank you for your advice. I do appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great question, Shirley, and for waking up so early. We've got Alexandra in the chat, and then we got Chris in scenes. Well, if you skip your question, your test question, Jill, you're gonna see Chris's question.
Oh, nice. Okay, let's keep that then. Okay, updated documentation size, started responsibility.
You can also click on standard.
Yeah, click standard.
Oh, yeah, that was it. Yeah, I was like, this is a weird question.
Chris is the puzzle,
leave some
the word
clues.
puzzle master. Guess the question.
So, what size were you when you started with documentation, and how we have placed the responsibility of keeping it updated? So it's been a whole thing. So the way we started documenting things, so it's a fun story. Actually, we used to have offices when we first started until 2019. So that was like 3 years in. We were like 10-ish. And at one point we wanted to hire in Paris, but we didn't have the fund, and the salaries was getting like very, very nuts. And we found this amazing guy. He was working from Chile, a French guy, but working from Chile, so really, really far. He was working on his own on time zone, right? So it was like about 6 or 8 hours down. So the only way we found to solve communication problems with him was just, let's write the best documentation we can do for him specifically at first. And then turns out it was actually something that felt right for everyone, even for us, because it's just like journaling. It's just journaling for company, for teams. All of a sudden you start like putting things in paper, shit starts to make sense, and then you're organized, and you're like, this is cool. And it kind of started this way. And I think when COVID hit, then this is actually when we already had those processes like very, very tight when 2020 hits. And when we went full remote, because obviously the context, we never looked back, because all the processes were there, and we didn't feel the need of actually going back to the office. And that was it. Essentially, it was. And the way we keep that updated, to answer the last part of your question, is we tried different things. We tried having our HR actually taking care of it and making sure to ping people whenever the documentation was updated or whatever. It kind of works, but it creates a bottleneck. And also it has this really bad side effect of people being just like, yeah, HR will just take care of it. No, that's not how it's supposed to happen. When you have offices, you have a room, we don't clean your room, you leave a freaking mess in your office. That's bad. Handling your handbook is exactly the same. Head off, executive manager, they should keep things tidy. That's it.
Classic. Michael, I see you. I'm just going to surface Alexandra's question from the chat, and then we come back to you. How to kickstart or promote a culture of learning in a big, fully remote company with a history of resistance to learning and organizational difficulties. Time zones, almost all of them between US and Australia.
That's a big one. Time zones are hell. And so I guess I'm trying to think that one out, but you need to find when you're remote. One of the things I haven't said in the deck, but also one of the very important things is you have to get together at some point, right? You cannot stay remote and behind a computer forever. For example, we gather by team once or twice per year, so given quarters, and then we have one or two big offsite with everyone, and usually on the same location, or at least we have to start to have like sessions with. So it's a budget, but at the same time, if you don't have an office, you can also take that budget that you will have for your office and put that into those type of offsites. But this is the most efficient way we've seen to actually create a bounce, but also learning activities between you. I'll tell you an example. This year, we've been doing like a very complex revamp of the technology at Livestone. Okay, it was a big refactoring of the code base, and nobody will understand it. And obviously, sales is an engineer, right? So they don't understand it. So they won't understand why out of a sudden we were not shipping more features, or at least why we reduced the cadence. And the only way we found to solve this, obviously we built documentation and we did a lot of whole hands, a lot of presentations, blah, blah, blah. But the best way we found to actually create a learning experience on why we do it and what it's going to be useful for us was to create to gather people during an offsite and host a game of Jenga. That was it. Because a Jenga was a monolith, it represented the code base, and basically when my CTO was pushing a brick, the whole thing will fall down. And that was a perfect analogy, and it just snapped like this, and it was like, okay, now I get it. So to answer your question, you will have to invest in gathering people, and if there is topics that people need to learn, it has to be like very, very precisely, and you want to gather people, you have to have those like in-person workshops. And for the rest, let's say the kind of routine enablement thing is we have obviously documentation, as I said, but also we have, for example, specific teams that have enablement quizzes. So the sales team have like, we call it a big sales quiz, where actually a lot of different people come in, not just sales and also product, and you just like answer questions about the product, about the company, whatever, even the ICP type of profiling, that sort of thing. And then you have ranking. It's a way for us to build learning and have a cool remote type of activity, and kind of works.
Right. Okay, and then we have Michael. Final question. This is rapid fire now. Over to
Okay,
you.
I'll do my best.
Rapid fire for Gilles. Okay, Michael, over to you.
Yeah, of
Take
course.
away.
So you were mentioning about all the different things with documentation, trying to keep all that stuff up to date. Head of remote is one of those roles that I see more and more often. Like there's one for Todoist. Would you suggest a role like that works well for a remote company, or would you even see something like a head of documentation or something similar?
Yeah, it's true that I've seen that in the past. So I've seen companies like well, I know it was 2020, 2021, right? And people would just throw money at problem and hire people for every single little things in a company. So I'm not sure today is the right way of thinking about it. I think doing that is basically, as I said, it's just like, you're removing responsibility and ownership from the people that are supposed to write their own documentation. But what I think is interesting is having someone internally that is kind of a ambassador of the tool that you're using. So let's say you're using Notion, you're using, I don't know, Confluence, you're using whatever tool is useful. You have that person that can help you build up like the handbook or build documentation, like be the technical reference of the tool you're going to use. It might seem a bit weird, but what I realize is, let's take Notion, because we use Notion as a documentation tool, is even though it looks easy, it's not that easy for everyone. Not everybody know how to use documentation and know how to do the citing and everything. So actually having some sort of internal tooling expert that can also help on documentation, but also other things, is quite useful. but I wouldn't hire someone specifically for doing documentation, because honestly, it's just like removing ownership of people that are supposed to do it. Communicating and documenting is as important as everything for the managers, and that's in the job description in a remote company, at least.
Perfect, thanks.
Sure. Sorry, it wasn't really not rapid fire.
It
I'm really sorry.
was good. It was good. You did well. Thank you so much, Gilles. This was
Thank you.
great. It was awesome. Always great to expand a bit our brains and understanding about remote collaboration and work. Thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in at 8 in the evening. Everyone else who is in the room, thank you for all your questions. This was awesome. And well, I'll stick around because Pedro is here and we're continuing our journey.
All right, so I'll
But
just
you
start
are
the screen
dismissed.
sharing.
Thank you very much.
See ya.
Take
Thank you,
care.
everyone.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
evening.
Bye.
Bye, Gilles.